When billionaire CEO Jonathan Miller fired the cleaning lady for speaking perfect English, he never imagined discovering her true identity would change his life forever. What happened next would expose the biggest corporate scandal in New York history, bring down some of Wall Street's most powerful executives, and transform two lives in ways nobody could have predicted. Before we get to this wonderful story, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now let's get back to the story. It was a cold Tuesday morning in November when Jonathan Miller, CEO and founder of Miller Financial Group, stepped out of his private elevator on the 52nd floor of his Wall Street headquarters. The autumn sun struggled to penetrate the gray clouds hanging over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office that overlooked the Hudson River and the sprawling financial district below. At 38 years old, Jonathan had built Miller Financial from a small investment advisory firm operating out of a shared office space in Queens into one of Wall Street's most powerful hedge funds, managing over $18 billion in assets for some of the world's wealthiest individuals, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds. His personal net worth exceeded $3.2 billion, built through a combination of shrewd investments, aggressive acquisition strategies, and an almost supernatural ability to predict market movements before his competitors. His face regularly appeared on the covers of Forbes, Fortune, Bloomberg Businessweek, and the Wall Street Journal. Financial television networks competed to book him as a guest expert, and his annual letter to investors was studied by business schools around the world as a masterclass in strategic thinking and market analysis. But this particular morning, something was bothering Jonathan in a way that he couldn't quite articulate. As he walked through the pristine marble hallways of Miller Financial Group's headquarters toward his massive corner office, he noticed that the cleaning woman who worked the overnight shift was still there, meticulously finishing her duties well past her scheduled departure time. But he had no idea what was coming next. The woman appeared to be in her early to mid-40s, with graying dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and wearing the standard-issue gray uniform of Citywide Cleaning Services, the company that Miller Financial Group contracted to maintain their offices. She was working with incredible attention to detail, carefully organizing papers on a junior analyst's desk, being extraordinarily careful not to disturb any important documents while ensuring that every surface was perfectly clean and organized. What caught Jonathan's attention wasn't her thoroughness. He demanded and expected absolute perfection from everyone who worked in his building, regardless of their role or position, but rather the fact that she was actually reading one of the complex financial reports that had been left on the analyst's desk. Not just glancing at it casually or moving it aside, but actually reading it with obvious comprehension and what appeared to be genuine intellectual engagement. Jonathan had built his fortune on his ability to read people, to understand their motivations and capabilities within seconds of meeting them. In his 15 years on Wall Street, he had encountered thousands of executives, analysts, traders, and support staff, and he prided himself on being able to assess someone's competence and value to his organization almost instantaneously. But he had never encountered a cleaning person who appeared to be analyzing complex derivatives trading strategies while emptying trash cans. "Excuse me," Jonathan said sharply, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had intimidated countless Wall Street executives, federal regulators, and Fortune 500 CEOs over the years. "What exactly are you doing?" What she said next left him completely speechless. The woman looked up from the report, startled by his sudden appearance but not intimidated by his obvious displeasure. Her dark brown eyes met his directly, without the deference or nervousness that Jonathan typically expected from support staff. "I apologize, Mr. Miller. I was cleaning Mr. Davidson's desk and couldn't help but notice this analysis of the European sovereign debt crisis. The conclusion seemed fundamentally flawed and potentially dangerous." Jonathan felt like he had been struck by lightning. In his 15 years on Wall Street, he had never heard a cleaning person use terms like European sovereign debt crisis or suggest that a Goldman Sachs analysis prepared by their senior European economists was fundamentally flawed and potentially dangerous. The report in question was a highly confidential analysis that Goldman Sachs had prepared exclusively for Miller Financial Group, examining potential investment opportunities in European government bonds. It had cost his company $250,000 in consulting fees, and only 5 people in his organization were supposed to have access to it. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" The woman straightened up to her full height, which brought her to about eye level with Jonathan's chin, and met his gaze with a confidence that seemed completely incongruous with her gray cleaning uniform and worn sneakers. The report concludes that Greek sovereign debt will stabilize within 18 months and recommends significant investment in Greek government bonds. However, the analysis doesn't adequately account for the interconnected nature of European banking systems and the cascade effects that a Greek default would have on Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian financial institutions. The revelation that would change everything. Jonathan stood completely frozen, staring at this cleaning woman who had just delivered a more sophisticated analysis of European financial markets than most of his Harvard MBA analysts could produce, even after weeks of research and preparation. "Who are you?" he asked slowly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "My name is Maria Rodriguez. I work for Citywide Cleaning Services. I've been cleaning your building Monday through Friday, midnight to 6 a.m., for the past 8 months. "That's not what I meant," Jonathan said, his voice growing harder and more suspicious. "Where did you learn to analyze international financial markets and sovereign debt instruments?" Maria hesitated for a moment, glancing around the empty office as if checking to make sure they were alone. "I used to work in finance, Mr. Miller, before my life completely fell apart, before what happened, before I lost everything and everyone I cared about, and ended up sleeping in homeless shelters and working cleaning jobs just to survive." Jonathan's mind was racing with possibilities and scenarios. In his experience, people didn't go from understanding complex financial derivatives and international monetary policy to cleaning office buildings and emptying trash cans unless something truly catastrophic had occurred in their lives. His first instinct was deep suspicion. Was she some kind of corporate spy working for one of his competitors? A federal investigator trying to infiltrate his company? A disgruntled former employee seeking revenge? Little did he know, she was hiding something incredible. "What's your educational background?" Jonathan demanded, his tone becoming more aggressive and prosecutorial. "MBA from the Wharton School of Business, with a concentration in international finance and risk management. Undergraduate degree in economics and mathematics from Columbia University, summa cum laude," Maria replied quietly, but without any trace of shame or embarrassment. Jonathan felt like the world had tilted off its axis. Wharton and Columbia were among the most prestigious business and undergraduate institutions in America. People with those credentials didn't clean office buildings and empty wastebaskets. They ran major corporations, managed billion-dollar investment portfolios, or held senior positions at the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department. "That's impossible," he said flatly, his voice filled with disbelief and growing anger. "If you had those qualifications and that educational background, you'd be working for Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, or Morgan Stanley, not cleaning toilets and vacuuming carpets." Maria's expression hardened slightly, and for the first time since their conversation had begun, Jonathan detected a flash of anger in her dark eyes. "Mr. Miller, with all due respect, you don't know anything about my life or the circumstances that brought me to this point. You don't know what I've been through or what I've had to survive." "Then enlighten me," Jonathan challenged, crossing his arms and staring at her with the intense focus he typically reserved for hostile takeover negotiations. "Because either you're lying about your credentials to impress me for some reason, or there's something seriously and fundamentally wrong with this entire situation." Her response would change everything he thought he knew about success and failure. Maria set down her cleaning supplies and looked directly at Jonathan with a dignity and composure that seemed completely incongruous with her gray uniform and the industrial cart filled with mops, vacuum cleaners, and bottles of cleaning solution. 12 years ago, I was a senior vice president at Lehman Brothers, specializing in mortgage-backed securities, collateralized debt obligations, and structured financial products. I was making $2.8 million per year, living in a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, and managing a portfolio worth over $12 billion for some of the wealthiest individuals and institutions in the world. Jonathan's skepticism began to waver slightly. Lehman Brothers had been one of Wall Street's most prestigious investment banks, until its spectacular and catastrophic collapse in September 2008, which had triggered the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. "When Lehman collapsed," Maria continued, her voice steady but filled with pain that was still evident even after all these years, "I didn't just lose my job like most of the other employees. I lost everything I had worked for during my entire adult life. My personal investment portfolio was heavily concentrated in Lehman Brothers stock and company-related securities. My pension fund, my 401k retirement account, my savings, all of it vanished overnight when the company declared bankruptcy." She paused, and Jonathan could see tears beginning to form in her eyes, though her voice remained strong and controlled. "But losing my money wasn't even the worst part of what happened to me. In the final months before Lehman's collapse, I discovered that my department head, Richard Steinberg, was deliberately packaging toxic subprime mortgages into securities that he knew would fail, and then selling those securities to pension funds, university endowments, and other institutional investors, while secretly betting against those same securities for the bank's proprietary trading account. The truth was more shocking than anyone could have imagined." Jonathan found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed in Maria's story. He knew Richard Steinberg by reputation. The man was now working as a managing director at Goldman Sachs and was widely respected throughout the financial industry as one of the most brilliant minds in structured finance. "When I tried to blow the whistle internally and report Steinberg's activities to senior management," Maria continued, "he discovered what I was doing and moved quickly to destroy my career and reputation.
He had me fired for what he claimed were performance issues and concerns about my mental stability, and then he systematically spread rumors throughout the industry that I was emotionally unstable, professionally incompetent, and potentially dangerous. What kind of rumors? Jonathan asked, despite himself becoming genuinely interested in her story. He told people that I had been making erratic investment decisions that cost the company millions of dollars, that I had been behaving strangely in meetings, that I had made threats against other employees. None of it was true, but Steinberg was extremely well connected throughout Wall Street, and people believed him. Maria walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and stared out at the Manhattan skyline, where dozens of glass towers house some of the world's most powerful financial institutions. Steinberg made absolutely certain that I was completely blacklisted throughout the entire industry. No major financial firm would even consider hiring me. I couldn't get interviews at mid-tier regional banks or smaller investment advisory firms. My professional reputation had been destroyed by lies and deliberate sabotage, and I had no way to fight back because I couldn't afford the legal fees required to challenge someone with Steinberg's connections and resources. The devastating consequences that followed. So what happened to you after that? Jonathan asked, his voice softer now as he began to understand the magnitude of what Maria had experienced. I burned through my emergency savings within 4 months trying to pay for my apartment, food and basic living expenses while searching desperately for any kind of work. When my money ran out, I lost my apartment and had to move in with my sister and her family in Queens. But that arrangement only lasted 6 months before the financial strain became too much for them to handle. Maria turned away from the window and faced Jonathan directly. For the past 9 years, I've been working whatever jobs I could find, cleaning offices, washing dishes in restaurants, stocking shelves at grocery stores, anything that would pay enough money to keep me alive and housed. I've been living in a studio apartment in the Bronx that costs $800 per month, and I take the subway to Manhattan every night to clean office buildings. Jonathan stared at this woman, this brilliant, highly educated, formerly successful woman, who had been invisible to him for 8 months as she cleaned his office building. She had been walking these halls every single night, using her world-class financial education and years of Wall Street experience to scrub floors, empty trash cans, and clean toilets. "Why are you telling me all of this?" he asked finally. Maria looked out the window again, at the Manhattan skyline, where the morning sun was beginning to break through the gray clouds and reflect off the glass surfaces of the towering skyscrapers that house some of the world's most powerful financial institutions. "Because, Mr. Miller, I've been watching your company very carefully for the past 8 months, and I believe you're about to make a decision that could destroy Miller Financial Group and cost thousands of people their jobs." What she revealed next would send shockwaves through Wall Street. Jonathan's blood ran cold, and he felt his heart begin to race. "What are you talking about? What decision?" Maria walked over to Jonathan's massive mahogany desk, where several highly confidential documents were spread out from his late-night strategy session with his 3 senior partners. She pointed to a particular report that was marked "Confidential, Senior Management Only" in large red letters. This proposal to invest $8 billion in European sovereign debt instruments over the next 6 months? It's going to be a catastrophic disaster that will bankrupt your company. Jonathan felt like he was going to be sick. The information Maria was referencing was supposed to be known only to himself and his 3 most trusted senior partners. The European investment strategy had been developed over the past 4 months in absolute secrecy, and they were planning to present it to the board of directors for approval at a meeting scheduled for the following Thursday. "How could you possibly know about our confidential investment strategies?" he demanded, his voice rising with a combination of fear and anger. "Because I clean all of the offices on this floor every single night, Mr. Miller. For the past 8 months, I've seen every document, every report, every strategy memo, and every analysis that crosses the desks of your senior management team, and every night I've watched your company moving steadily toward the same kind of cliff that destroyed Lehman Brothers and cost 25,000 people their jobs. The analysis that would save or destroy everything." Maria picked up the Goldman Sachs report that had started their conversation and pointed to a specific section highlighted in yellow. "These AAA-rated European government bonds that your team is planning to purchase. They're backed by the same kinds of toxic underlying economic fundamentals that caused the 2008 financial crisis. The European credit rating agencies are making exactly the same mistakes that American rating agencies made with subprime mortgage securities." She pulled out a worn notebook from her cleaning supplies cart, a simple spiral-bound pad that looked completely out of place among the expensive leather portfolios and high-tech devices that typically furnished Jonathan's office. "I've been conducting my own analysis of the European debt situation for the past 6 months, tracking the real underlying economic indicators that the official reports either ignore or deliberately misrepresent." Maria opened the notebook, revealing pages and pages of detailed financial calculations, charts, graphs, and analytical frameworks that would have impressed senior analysts at any major investment bank. The mathematical models were sophisticated, the data sources were comprehensive, and the conclusions were presented with the kind of rigor that Jonathan associated with the best work produced by his own research department. "The Greek situation is far worse than anyone in the financial markets realizes or is willing to admit publicly. Portugal, Spain, and Italy are in similarly precarious positions. When the dominoes start falling, and my analysis suggests that will happen within the next 12 to 18 months, Anyone holding significant positions in European sovereign debt will be completely wiped out. The revelation that would change Wall Street forever. Jonathan studied Maria's notebook with the focused intensity he typically reserved for the most important investment decisions of his career. His Harvard MBA, his 15 years of Wall Street experience, and his almost supernatural ability to analyze market trends were all telling him that Maria's analysis was not only mathematically sophisticated and methodologically sound, but also probably accurate in its dire predictions. "Why would you help me?" Jonathan asked finally, looking up from the notebook to meet Maria's steady gaze. "I haven't exactly been kind to you or even acknowledged your existence. Until today, I didn't even know your name." Maria closed the notebook and looked at him with an expression that combined sadness, determination, and something that Jonathan couldn't quite identify, perhaps hope, or maybe just exhaustion. "Because despite what you might think about cleaning ladies and people who work in service industries, I'm not a vindictive or bitter person. And because I've seen firsthand what happens when good companies with decent people make catastrophically bad decisions based on incomplete or deliberately misleading information." She paused, then continued in a voice that was barely above a whisper, "And maybe because I hope that someday someone will give me a second chance to use the skills and knowledge that I spent 20 years of my life developing, instead of just assuming that I'm worthless because of the uniform I wear and the job I do to survive."
Jonathan was quiet for several minutes, staring out at the Manhattan skyline while processing everything that Maria had told him. His company's entire future and the livelihoods of over 3,000 employees hinged on the investment decision that he was supposed to finalize and present to his board of directors in just 2 days.
"Maria," he said finally, turning back to face her, "I want you to prepare a complete and comprehensive analysis of the European debt situation. I'm canceling Thursday's board meeting and postponing any final investment decisions until I've had a chance to review your work thoroughly. The offer that would shock everyone."
"Mr. Miller," Maria replied, "I clean toilets and empty trash cans for a living. Your board of directors isn't going to listen to financial analysis prepared by a janitor, no matter how sophisticated or accurate it might be. Then I guess we'll have to change your job title, won't we?" Jonathan picked up his phone and pressed the speed dial for his executive assistant. "Rebecca, I need you in my office immediately. Cancel the board meeting for Thursday and reschedule it for next Tuesday. And I need you to set up a temporary office on this floor right away, whatever space is available." He looked at Maria while continuing to speak into the phone. "Also, call Human Resources and tell them to prepare employment paperwork for a new senior-level hire. Starting salary $750,000 per year, plus full benefits and performance bonuses." Maria stared at him in complete shock. "Mr. Miller, you cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious about anything in my entire professional life," Jonathan replied, hanging up the phone. "As of right now, you are no longer a cleaning lady. You are Miller Financial Group's new Senior Risk Assessment Officer, reporting directly to me. You just potentially saved my company $8 billion and prevented us from repeating the same catastrophic mistakes that destroyed Lehman Brothers and triggered a global financial crisis." But instead of looking pleased or grateful, Maria appeared worried and almost frightened. "There's something else you need to know before you make any decisions about my employment," she said quietly. "The secret that would change everything they thought they knew." "What now?" Jonathan asked, wondering what other revelations this extraordinary woman might be hiding. "The reason I know so much about your company's confidential strategies and internal documents isn't only because I've been cleaning offices and reading papers that were left on desks." Jonathan felt his stomach drop. Maria reached into her cleaning cart and pulled out what appeared to be a sophisticated digital recording device, along with a thick manila folder containing dozens of photographs showing documents from Jonathan's office, his partner's offices, and various conference rooms throughout the Miller Financial Group headquarters.
"For the past 10 months, I've been working as an undercover investigator for the Securities and Exchange Commission.
They suspected Miller Financial Group of insider trading, securities fraud, and market manipulation, and they hired me to infiltrate your organization and gather evidence of illegal activities." Jonathan felt like the world was collapsing around him. You're a federal agent." "Not exactly an agent, but I am working directly with the SEC's Enforcement Division and the FBI's White-Collar Crime Unit. They approached me 18 months ago because of my background in structured finance and because my cleaning job would give me access to information and documents that would be impossible to obtain through conventional investigative methods." The office was completely silent except for the sound of Manhattan traffic 42 floors below them. Jonathan could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "So everything you just told me, about helping me avoid the European debt crisis, about saving my company from making a catastrophic mistake, that was all part of your federal investigation? The truth that nobody could have predicted." Maria shook her head emphatically. "No, Mr. Miller, that's exactly what makes this situation so complicated and unusual. The SEC investigation was focused specifically on potential insider trading related to your biotechnology and pharmaceutical sector investments. I was looking for evidence that you or your senior partners were trading on material non-public information obtained through illegal means. And what did you find? Jonathan asked, barely able to speak. That's exactly the point. I found absolutely nothing. After 10 months of intensive investigation, including complete access to your confidential documents, recorded conversations, email communications, and trading records, I found no evidence whatsoever of insider trading, securities fraud, market manipulation, or any other illegal activities. Jonathan let out a breath that he didn't realize he had been holding. Miller Financial Group operates with complete integrity and in full compliance with all applicable laws and regulations, Maria continued. Your trading decisions are based on legitimate research, publicly available information, and sophisticated analytical models. You don't engage in any of the unethical or illegal practices that destroyed my career at Lehman Brothers. She placed the recording device on Jonathan's desk. I was supposed to deliver my final report to the SEC this Friday, concluding that there is no evidence of wrongdoing at your company. The federal investigation will be officially closed, and Miller Financial Group will never hear from them again. Then why are you telling me about the European debt crisis? Why are you trying to help me avoid what you believe will be a disastrous investment decision? Maria was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. Because 12 years ago, when Lehman Brothers was moving toward its collapse, I tried desperately to warn people about what was happening. I tried to blow the whistle on the toxic securities we were packaging and selling to unsuspecting clients. But nobody would listen to me, and 25,000 people lost their jobs when the company failed. The moral courage that would inspire a generation. She turned back to face Jonathan directly. I will not let that happen again if I have any power to prevent it. Miller Financial Group employs over 3,000 people in New York alone, plus another 1,200 employees in your Chicago, Los Angeles, and London offices. Those are more than 4,000 families who depend on your company for their livelihoods, their health insurance, their retirement security, and their children's futures. Jonathan felt something he hadn't experienced in many years. Genuine respect and admiration for another person's moral courage and integrity. You're risking your federal investigation, your cooperation agreement with the SEC, and potentially your own legal safety to warn me about a completely separate financial risk that has nothing to do with your official assignment. That's exactly right, Maria confirmed. Why would you do that? Because preventing a financial catastrophe that could destroy thousands of lives is more important than following bureaucratic procedures or protecting my own interests. Jonathan stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the bustling streets of Lower Manhattan where thousands of people were beginning their morning commutes, completely unaware that a conversation taking place 42 floors above them might determine the economic fate of their families and communities. Maria, I want to make you a different offer. The offer that would transform Wall Street. Instead of Senior Risk Assessment Officer, I want you to become Miller Financial Group's Chief Risk Officer. You'll have complete authority to evaluate all major investment decisions, with the power to veto any proposal that you consider too risky, regardless of its potential profitability. Maria's eyes widened. Mr. Miller, Chief Risk Officer is typically a position for someone with decades of senior management experience. Someone with an MBA from Wharton, extensive experience in structured finance and risk management, a track record of identifying systemic problems before they become catastrophic, and the moral courage to blow the whistle on dangerous practices even when it might destroy their own career? Someone exactly like you. He walked back to his desk and extended his hand. Starting salary, $200 million per year, plus equity ownership in the company and performance bonuses that could double your compensation. Your first assignment will be to completely overhaul our European investment strategy and develop new risk assessment protocols for all of our major investment decisions. Maria stared at his outstretched hand. What about the SEC investigation? What about my cooperation agreement with the federal government? What about my past and the circumstances that brought me to this point? The SEC investigation is closing with a finding of no wrongdoing. You said so yourself. As for your past, you were a whistleblower who tried to prevent a financial crisis that ultimately cost millions of people their jobs and homes. In my opinion, that makes you exactly the kind of person I want making risk management decisions for my company. Her answer would change both of their lives forever. I accept your offer, Maria said, shaking Jonathan's hand firmly. But I have several conditions that are non-negotiable. Name them. First, I want complete independence and authority to reject any investment proposal that I consider excessive risk, regardless of pressure from you, the other senior partners, or the board of directors. Agreed. Second, I want to establish a comprehensive whistleblower protection program for all Miller Financial Group employees. Anyone who identifies potential problems or unethical behavior should be rewarded and protected, not punished or retaliated against. Excellent idea. What else? Third, I want Richard Steinberg investigated for his role in the Lehman Brothers collapse and his current activities at Goldman Sachs. I have evidence that he's continuing to engage in the same kind of fraudulent practices that contributed to the 2008 financial crisis, and I believe he's putting the entire financial system at risk again. Jonathan smiled grimly. Maria, I have a feeling that this partnership is going to be very interesting and very profitable. And fourth, Maria continued, I want Miller Financial Group to establish a fund to provide career transition support and legal assistance for financial industry whistleblowers who have been blacklisted or retaliated against for trying to expose unethical practices. How much money are we talking about? I think $50 million would be a good starting point. Jonathan didn't hesitate. Done. Anything else? Just one more thing. I want to donate my first year's salary to organizations that provide support services for homeless individuals and families in the New York area. The transformation that would inspire Wall Street. 6 months later, the Wall Street Journal published a front-page story with the headline, Miller Financial Avoids European Debt Catastrophe. The article detailed how Miller Financial Group's chief risk officer, Dr. Maria Rodriguez, had prevented the company from investing $8 billion in European sovereign debt securities just months before those bonds lost over 75% of their value in what became known as the European debt crisis of 20. The European financial crisis had unfolded exactly as Maria had predicted in her handwritten notebook. Greece defaulted on its sovereign debt obligations, triggering cascading failures across Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian banking systems. Several major investment firms that had invested heavily in European government bonds, including 2 of Miller Financial Group's primary competitors, lost billions of dollars and were forced to lay off thousands of employees. Miller Financial Group, meanwhile, had not only avoided catastrophic losses but had actually profited substantially by short-selling European debt securities and investing in gold, Swiss francs, and other safe haven assets based on Maria's recommendations and analysis. The company's successful navigation of the European crisis, combined with Maria's implementation of revolutionary risk management protocols, had attracted billions of dollars in new investment capital from institutional clients who were impressed by Miller Financial Group's disciplined approach to risk assessment and ethical business practices. But the biggest shock was still coming. The story that captured national attention, however, wasn't just about a successful investment strategy. It was about Maria's previous work as an undercover federal investigator and the massive Wall Street corruption scandal that her evidence had helped expose. Maria's documentation of Richard Steinberg's activities had provided federal prosecutors with the foundation for a major investigation of Goldman Sachs and several other large investment banks. FBI agents discovered that Steinberg had been operating essentially the same fraudulent scheme that he had used at Lehman Brothers, deliberately packaging toxic financial instruments and selling them to pension funds, university endowments, and other institutional investors, while secretly betting against those same securities for Goldman Sachs's proprietary trading accounts. The federal investigation ultimately expanded to include 14 senior executives at 6 major financial institutions, all of whom had been collaborating in what prosecutors described as the largest securities fraud conspiracy since the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s. The scandal sent shockwaves through Wall Street and led to congressional hearings, new federal regulations, and criminal prosecutions that resulted in dozens of convictions and billions of dollars in fines and restitution payments. The truth about Maria's real identity. At a press conference following the announcement of the first wave of indictments, FBI Director Sarah Chen revealed additional details about the scope and significance of the investigation. Dr. Rodriguez wasn't simply a former Lehman Brothers executive who became a whistleblower, Director Chen announced to a room full of reporters and television cameras. She has been working as a consulting investigator for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit for the past 4 years, using her expertise in structured finance and her access to Wall Street institutions to gather evidence against corrupt executives who have been manipulating markets and defrauding investors since the 2008 financial crisis. The room erupted with questions, but Director Chen continued her prepared statement. Dr. Rodriguez's undercover work has led to the recovery of over $23 billion in fraudulent profits, the prevention of what our economic analysts believe could have been another financial crisis comparable to 2008, and the successful prosecution of what may be the largest financial fraud conspiracy in American history. Jonathan Miller, watching the press conference from his office, felt a mixture of admiration, gratitude, and amazement. The woman he had hired as his chief risk officer was actually one of the FBI's most effective undercover financial investigators. The phone call that would seal their partnership. That afternoon, Maria knocked on Jonathan's office door. When she entered, she was wearing her normal business attire, but she was also carrying an FBI identification badge and official credentials. "I suppose you have questions," she said. "Just one," Jonathan replied. "Was anything you told me about your personal story actually true?" "Everything I told you about my background, my education, my experience at Lehman Brothers, and my treatment by Richard Steinberg was completely accurate," Maria assured him. "What I didn't initially reveal was that the FBI approached me 3 years ago and offered me an opportunity to work undercover to gather evidence against the people who had destroyed so many lives during the 2008 financial crisis." She sat down across from Jonathan's desk. "My work with the federal government is now complete. Steinberg and his co-conspirators have been arrested, and I'm no longer needed for undercover operations." "What does that mean for your position here at Miller Financial Group?" Maria placed her FBI credentials on Jonathan's desk. "It means that I'm formally resigning from my consulting relationship with the FBI, effective immediately. If your offer to serve as Chief Risk Officer is still available, I would like to accept it on a permanent basis. The decision that would define their future." Jonathan looked at the FBI credentials, then back at Maria. "You're giving up a career in federal law enforcement to work for a Wall Street investment firm." "I'm choosing to work for a Wall Street firm that operates with integrity and actually cares about making ethical decisions," Maria corrected. "There aren't many of those left in this industry. What about your mission to expose financial corruption and protect ordinary investors from fraudulent schemes?" "I can accomplish more good working inside a company that's committed to ethical practices than I can working undercover for the federal government. The financial industry needs people who will make the right decisions in the first place, not just investigators who arrest the bad actors after the damage has already been done." Jonathan considered this carefully. Maria had already proven her value by saving Miller Financial Group from what would have been a catastrophic investment mistake. Her integrity and moral courage were beyond question. Her financial expertise was world-class, and her risk management skills were possibly the best he had ever encountered. "The position is yours," Jonathan said finally. "But I want to modify our arrangement slightly." "What kind of modification?" "Instead of just serving as Chief Risk Officer, I want you to become my partner in transforming Miller Financial Group into a model for how financial services companies should operate. Complete transparency with clients, ethical investment practices, comprehensive employee protection programs, and a commitment to making decisions based on what's right, rather than what's most profitable in the short term." Maria extended her hand across Jonathan's desk. "Mr. Miller, that sounds like exactly the kind of challenge I've been looking for my entire career." 1 year later, the transformation that changed Wall Street. Miller Financial Group had become the most respected and sought-after investment management firm on Wall Street. Under Maria's leadership, the company had implemented revolutionary transparency practices that allowed clients to see exactly how their money was being invested, what risks were being taken on their behalf, and how investment decisions were being made. The firm's ethical investment framework, developed jointly by Jonathan and Maria, had become the gold standard for responsible financial management. Other investment companies across the industry were adopting similar practices, and business schools around the country were teaching case studies based on Miller Financial Group's approach to ethical business operations. Maria herself had become one of the most sought-after speakers on financial ethics and risk management, addressing audiences at Harvard Business School, the Wharton School, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and congressional hearings on financial industry reform. The company's assets under management had grown from $18 billion to $31 billion as institutional investors and wealthy individuals sought out an investment firm they could trust to manage their money with both competence and integrity. The personal transformation that surprised everyone. But perhaps the most significant change wasn't in Miller Financial Group's business operations. It was in the personal relationship that had developed between Jonathan and Maria. What had started as a professional partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to ethical business practices had gradually evolved into something much deeper and more personal. Jonathan had discovered that his conversations with Maria about business strategy, risk management, and market analysis were the most intellectually stimulating and personally fulfilling interactions of his professional career. Maria, meanwhile, had found in Jonathan something she had never expected to discover again after her devastating experience at Lehman Brothers: a business leader who actually valued integrity over profit, who listened to her ideas and opinions with genuine respect, and who was committed to using his wealth and influence to make a positive difference in the world. Their working relationship had gradually extended beyond the confines of Miller Financial Group's offices. They began having dinner together to discuss complex investment strategies and risk management frameworks. They attended financial industry conferences as partners, presenting their ethical investment model to audiences of business leaders and regulatory officials. Jonathan found himself looking forward to their conversations more than any other part of his workday. Maria's intelligence, moral courage, and unique perspective on financial markets challenged him to think more deeply about the purpose and impact of his business decisions. The realization that changed everything. On a snowy evening in December, Jonathan and Maria were working late in his office, reviewing the final details of a major investment proposal that would commit $2.3 billion of client funds to a diversified portfolio of renewable energy infrastructure projects. The proposal represented exactly the kind of ethical, long-term value creation that had become the hallmark of Miller Financial Group's investment philosophy. "This is exactly the kind of investment that the financial industry should be making," Maria said, reviewing the environmental impact assessments and economic projections.
profitable returns for our clients, job creation in emerging industries, and positive environmental outcomes for society. Jonathan looked at her across his desk, illuminated by the soft light of his desk lamp while snow fell silently against the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. At some point during the past year, he had realized that his feelings for Maria extended far beyond professional admiration and respect. "Maria," he said quietly, "can I ask you something personal?" She looked up from the documents. "Of course. Are you happy? I mean, truly happy with the direction your life has taken over the past year?" Maria set down her pen and considered the question seriously. "A year ago, I was cleaning office buildings and living in a studio apartment in the Bronx, wondering if I would ever have the opportunity to use my education and experience for anything meaningful again. Today, I'm the chief risk officer of one of Wall Street's most successful investment firms. I'm making decisions that affect billions of dollars and thousands of jobs, and I'm working with someone who shares my commitment to ethical business practices." She paused, then continued. "So yes, I'm happier than I ever imagined I could be again. But more than that, I feel like my life has purpose and meaning in a way that it hasn't since before the Lehman Brothers collapse." "I'm glad," Jonathan said, "because I need to tell you something that I've been thinking about for months. The confession that would change 2 lives forever." "What is it?" Maria asked, noting the unusual seriousness in Jonathan's voice. Jonathan stood up and walked to the windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, where thousands of lights twinkled in the office buildings and apartments that housed millions of people whose financial security depended, in part, on the decisions made by firms like Miller Financial Group. "When I first encountered you reading that financial report 8 months ago, I thought I was dealing with an unusual situation that I could handle with my typical business approach: assess the problem, make a decision, move on to the next issue." He turned back to face Maria. "What I didn't expect was to meet someone who would completely change how I think about business, about success, about what it means to use wealth and power responsibly." Maria felt her heart beginning to race, sensing that Jonathan was about to say something that would fundamentally alter their relationship. "You've made me a better person, Maria. Not just a better businessman, but a better human being. You've shown me that integrity isn't a liability in business, it's the ultimate competitive advantage. You've taught me that the most important decisions we make aren't about maximizing profits, but about how we treat people and what kind of impact we have on the world." Jonathan walked back to his desk and looked directly into Maria's eyes. "I've fallen in love with you, not just with your intelligence and competence, but with your moral courage, your compassion, and your commitment to making the world a better place." The response that nobody could have predicted. Maria was quiet for a long moment, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions that she hadn't experienced since before her life had been destroyed by Richard Steinberg's lies and manipulation. "Jonathan," she said finally, "what you're suggesting would be incredibly complicated. We're business partners. I report to you professionally. There are power dynamics and potential conflicts of interest that could create serious problems." "You're right," Jonathan acknowledged. "It would be complicated. But Maria, the best things in life usually are complicated." Maria stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the same Manhattan skyline that had witnessed her transformation from homeless cleaning lady to successful business executive. 8 years ago, after I lost everything at Lehman Brothers, I convinced myself that I would never again put myself in a position where another person could have that kind of power over my life and career. I built walls around myself and focused entirely on survival." She turned back to face Jonathan. "But working with you over this past year has reminded me that not all successful, powerful men are like Richard Steinberg. Some of them actually have integrity and use their influence to help others rather than to destroy them." Jonathan waited, afraid to speak and potentially influence her decision. "I've fallen in love with you too," Maria said quietly. "With your intelligence, your commitment to ethical business practices, and your willingness to change your entire approach to business based on what you learned from someone who was supposedly just a cleaning lady. The decision that would transform their partnership. So what do we do about it?" Jonathan asked. "We have to be extremely careful about how we handle this," Maria replied. "Our professional relationship is too important, both to us personally and to the thousands of people who depend on Miller Financial Group, for us to risk compromising it with personal complications." Jonathan nodded. "What do you suggest?" "I suggest that we continue working together as professional partners for now, while we explore whether our personal feelings can coexist with our business relationship without creating conflicts or problems. And how do we do that?" Maria smiled for the first time since their conversation had taken this personal turn, very carefully, and with complete honesty about any issues or concerns that arise. Jonathan extended his hand across his desk. "Partners in business and in life. Partners in business and in life," Maria agreed, shaking his hand. 6 months later, the wedding that shocked Wall Street. On a beautiful Saturday morning in June, Jonathan Miller and Maria Rodriguez were married in a small private ceremony in Central Park. The guest list included current and former FBI agents who had worked with Maria on financial crime investigations, several former Lehman Brothers colleagues who had rebuilt their careers after the 2008 collapse, and Miller Financial Group employees from every level of the company organization. The wedding made headlines in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Financial Times, not because of its social prominence or extravagance, but because of its symbolic significance. The billionaire CEO who had learned to value moral courage over ruthless ambition, and the former FBI undercover investigator who had chosen building ethical businesses over destroying corrupt ones. The ceremony was officiated by retired federal judge Margaret Chen, who had overseen many of the prosecutions that resulted from Maria's investigative work. In her remarks, Judge Chen noted that Jonathan and Maria's partnership represented a new model for how business leaders can create both financial success and positive social impact, the toast that inspired a generation of business leaders. At the wedding reception, held at a restaurant in Brooklyn that was owned by a formerly homeless entrepreneur who had been helped by Miller Financial Group's social impact investing program, Jonathan gave a toast that would be remembered on Wall Street for years to come. 18 months ago, I thought I understood what it meant to be successful in business. I measured success in dollars earned, assets managed, and personal net worth accumulated. I believed that business was fundamentally about competition, about winning by ensuring that others lost. He looked at Maria, radiant in her simple but elegant wedding dress. Then I met someone who taught me that the most valuable assets can't be quantified on any balance sheet or financial statement. Maria taught me that integrity isn't a constraint on business success, it's the foundation of sustainable business success. That transparency doesn't make you vulnerable to competitors, it makes you trustworthy to clients. And that the best investments aren't in financial instruments or market opportunities, but in the people who work alongside you and the communities that support your business. Jonathan raised his champagne glass. To my wife and business partner, Dr. Maria Rodriguez Miller, the smartest, most ethical, and most courageous person I've ever had the privilege of knowing. And to all of you who have supported us in building a business that we can be proud of, not just for its financial performance, but for its positive impact on the world. The legacy that continues to transform finance. 5 years after their wedding, the Miller model of ethical business practices has been adopted by financial services companies around the world. The Miller Financial Group Ethics Institute, established by Jonathan and Maria as a joint venture with Columbia Business School and the Wharton School, provides training and certification for business leaders who want to implement principled practices in their organizations. Maria's book, From Cleaning Lady to Chief Risk Officer, How Integrity Transforms Business and Lives, became a #1 New York Times bestseller and has been translated into 15 languages. The book is now required reading at business schools throughout the United States and Europe. The Miller Financial Group Whistleblower Protection and Support Fund, which started with Jonathan's initial commitment of $50 million, has grown to over $200 million and has provided legal assistance, career transition support, and financial aid to more than 500 individuals who were retaliated against for exposing unethical practices in various industries. Richard Steinberg completed his 14-year federal prison sentence last year and now works as a financial literacy instructor at a community college in Ohio, teaching students about the importance of ethical decision-making in business and the devastating consequences of securities fraud. The personal fulfillment that money couldn't buy. Today, Jonathan and Maria Miller operate not just Miller Financial Group, which now manages over $45 billion in assets, but also the Miller Foundation, which focuses on providing educational scholarships and career transition support for individuals who have been discriminated against or blacklisted in their professions. They have 3 children: David, age 6, who has already announced his intention to help people with their money problems when he grows up; Sarah, age 4, who demonstrates the same analytical mind and moral courage as her mother; and Jonathan Jr., age 2, who shows early signs of his father's strategic thinking abilities combined with his mother's ethical instincts. The Miller family lives in a townhouse on the Upper West Side that is comfortable but not ostentatious, and their children attend public schools where they interact with classmates from diverse economic and social backgrounds. Jonathan and Maria want their children to understand that personal worth isn't determined by wealth or social status, but by how you treat other people and what you contribute to your community. The daily reminder of what matters most. Every morning before work, Jonathan and Maria stop by the small memorial plaque they installed in the lobby of Miller Financial Group's headquarters. The plaque reads, "In memory of the 25,000 Lehman Brothers employees who lost their jobs on September 15, 2008, and in honor of all the whistleblowers who have risked their careers to protect others from financial fraud and corruption." Below the main inscription is a smaller quote: "Excellence in business is achieved not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away, including greed, corruption, and the assumption that profit requires compromising principles." The plaque serves as a daily reminder to everyone who works at Miller Financial Group that their primary responsibility isn't to shareholders or even to clients, but to the broader community of people whose lives are affected by their business decisions.
The ripple effect that changed an industry. The story of Jonathan and Maria Miller has become more than just a business success story or a romantic narrative. It has become a symbol of the possibility for fundamental change in how American capitalism operates. Business schools now teach case studies about the Miller transformation, analyzing how a chance encounter between a CEO and a cleaning lady led to the development of new models for ethical business practices that have been adopted by companies across multiple industries. The Securities and Exchange Commission has established the Maria Rodriguez Award for Financial Industry Whistleblowing, which recognizes individuals who risk their careers to expose fraud and protect investors from financial crimes. Congressional hearings on financial industry reform regularly feature testimony from Jonathan and Maria about how regulatory frameworks can be improved to encourage ethical behavior and protect whistleblowers from retaliation. The lesson that transcends business. But perhaps the most important lesson from their story isn't about business practices or regulatory policy. It's about the fundamental human capacity for transformation and redemption. Jonathan Miller discovered that true success isn't measured in dollars accumulated, but in lives positively affected and principles maintained under pressure. The ruthless focus on profit maximization that had made him wealthy had also made him spiritually and morally impoverished. His relationship with Maria taught him that the most valuable things in life, integrity, purpose, love, and respect, can't be purchased with money, but must be earned through character and action. Maria Rodriguez learned that even the most devastating professional and personal failures don't have to define the rest of your life. Her experience of being blacklisted, becoming homeless, and working cleaning jobs to survive could have destroyed her spirit and her faith in the possibility of justice. Instead, those experiences gave her the moral authority and practical knowledge necessary to become one of the most effective advocates for ethical business practices in American history. The continuing story. Today, when Jonathan and Maria Miller walk through the headquarters of Miller Financial Group, they see something that goes beyond a successful business. They see proof that it's possible to create organizations that generate both financial returns and positive social impact, that treat all employees with dignity regardless of their job titles or backgrounds, and that operate according to principles rather than just market opportunities. The cleaning staff at Miller Financial Group are paid living wages, receive full health insurance and retirement benefits, and have access to educational assistance programs that help them develop new skills and advance their careers if they choose to do so. Several former cleaning employees now work in professional positions within the company, and Miller Financial Group has become known throughout New York's service industry as one of the best employers in the city. The company's conference rooms are named after famous whistleblowers and ethical business leaders throughout history, including Karen Silkwood, Frank Serpico, and Sharon Watkins. The message is clear: Miller Financial Group values moral courage above personal ambition or blind loyalty. The final transformation, as Jonathan and Maria reflected on their journey from that first conversation in his office to their current position as leaders in the movement for ethical business practices, they realized that the most profound change hadn't been in their company's business model or financial performance. The most profound change had been in their understanding of what it means to live a meaningful life. Before they met each other, both Jonathan and Maria had defined success primarily in terms of personal achievement: money earned, status attained, recognition received. They had both learned, through very different experiences, that external measures of success are ultimately hollow if they're not grounded in relationships, principles, and contributions to something larger than themselves. Their partnership, both personal and professional, had taught them that the most rewarding achievements are collaborative rather than competitive, that the most valuable assets are trustworthiness and integrity rather than wealth and power, and that the most important legacy they could leave would be measured not in dollars bequeathed, but in lives transformed and principles upheld. The cleaning lady who became a chief risk officer and the billionaire CEO who learned to value integrity over profit had discovered something that money alone could never provide: the deep satisfaction that comes from building something together that makes the world a little bit better than they found it. And in a world where financial success is often achieved at the expense of moral principles, their story continues to inspire business leaders, regulatory officials, and ordinary citizens who believe that it's possible to succeed in business while maintaining your integrity, treating people with dignity, and using your influence to create positive change. Their love story had become a business transformation story, which had become a movement for ethical leadership that continues to ripple through industries, institutions, and individual lives around the world.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.